Now, it's time for the Anchormen podcast with Matt Gates and Dan Ball.
Hey, everybody, welcome back into the Anchorman podcast. Dan Ball here alongside Riley Lewis, another one of our main talk show hosts here at OAN, the One America News Network. Hopefully you're joining us on one of the new platforms because in addition to social media and YouTube and Rumble, we also put the Anchorman podcast on One America News Network, I believe over the weekends and stuff, and we have a lot of new carriers, so that means we have millions of new households we need to say howdy to. Sling TV customers, Dish Network, and then, of course, Charter Spectrum.
That's right.
And there's more to come, we hear. So OAN is making a comeback, as we should, Riley.
That's right.
How about them apples?
Well, it's very exciting. It really is. And I'm grateful to be here for all of it, just to witness this.
Right?
It's transformational right now, what's going on.
Well, especially after what we went through.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if folks know about the censoring that One America News went through. I mean, individuals can sit out there and complain, oh, my Facebook, my IG, my X got dinged during whatever it may be. And I don't want to say the words that will ding this podcast, so I won't say them. But you get, you know, they do that little dirty C word where they make it so they can't see you. And even if I say that dirty word, then they don't see us. So I won't even say that word. But we're just glad that common sense and smarter heads have prevailed. And that little pesky thing called freedom of speech and freedom of the press in that First Amendment is still being upheld in this wonderful constitutional republic.
Yes.
And so because of that, after all of the hiding of our content, I can use that word, hiding of our content for the last 4 years, we're now coming back bigger and better than ever because you cannot, in a country where you're supposed to have free speech, cancel, that's not the word I was thinking of, the other C word, you can't cancel an entire network, you know?
Yeah.
And so
well, I mean,
I'm glad to say we're back.
It's bigger than that. It's a war on the First Amendment and the Constitution. It's a war on the things that this country was built upon. So once anyone starts giving up on that, we lose this place. So that should be very alarming to everybody, regardless of what side you're on or what you think. We have to have, if we can't even speak freely, then do we even have a republic or a country that's worth living in?
No.
It's something to really think about.
Because, so I was watching what was it? Oh, it was Charlie Kirk debating some snotty smart kids over at Oxford, right? Yes. It was in Cambridge, at Oxford, talking with the,
Right.
So they got into a debate and he bragged up the young kids. He goes, you know, your country credits themselves with creating free speech. And fast forward, how many years later, y'all don't have it in jolly old London, England, anywhere in the UK, because they're arresting people over there for Facebook posts. Charlie said on average 30 a day. Wow. Cops, the bobbies, knock on the door. Hello, love. We saw you posted on Facebook this. Well, you can't do that. Come with us, handcuffs.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So if this country doesn't watch their P's and Q's, we could be in the same boat.
I saw that with Germany, with the German police that went on 60 Minutes maybe a month ago or something, and they said, number one, insulting somebody is illegal. Insulting somebody online is even worse because it lives forever on the internet. So they conducted a pre-dawn raid on somebody's house.
Oh my
Took
God.
their laptop, their cell phone, brought them to jail. What? For making like a fat joke online, which it's like we're living in 1984.
I know, but not in this country yet. And you know what? This is called a transition. We wouldn't be able to have these freedoms we're talking about if you didn't have brave men and women who would serve this country over the last how many years and fight wars and fight communism and fight all kinds of crap that has tried to take over. And let's be real, the last few years, there's been a big push in this country, okay? And coming from our own, I'm talking homegrown leaders in Washington, D.C. that were fine with canceling people. Yes. I'll keep using that one instead of the other one that ends in ship.
Well, they're advocating for it.
They're advocating for it.
Champions of
right. If your free speech doesn't coincide with their agenda and narrative, you don't have free speech anymore, according to a lot of folks in this country anymore. Because then you're a threat to our democracy, of which, if I hear that phrase one more time come out of any idiot lawmaker's mouth, I want to smack them right in the face. We're not a democracy. That's where the mob rules. That's where 50.1% can rule the other 49.9% of us. Right. And in a constitutional republic, no. 99% can't even tell 1% of us what to do or infringe on our rights.
Bingo.
That's why we came up with the Bill of Rights and the Declaration and the Constitution, and our founding fathers, who were all in their 20s and 30s, the majority of them, pretty smart young dudes back then, knew we got to do different than England does. We've got to allow people to say and do what they want in this nation, and that will make them truly free, which is what God wants for you, which is why we mention God so often in the Constitution and everywhere else. And we've derived a bunch of our laws and rules based on biblical preachings, right?
Yes.
And so we are unlike anywhere else.
Completely.
Because that one American you could never, or that one network should never be canceled because you don't like what we're saying, or we're not towing the line for the government. That's state-run media. That's state-run TV. That's Russia-China crap. We don't have that here. Oh, wait, or do we?
You could debate it with some of these organizations, but even if they're not state-owned, they're constantly doing the deep state's bidding. That's what they exist. They are a PR firm for permanent Washington, and they are defending the so-called defenders of democracy who are shutting it down and trying to turn this place into a police state. That's what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were really getting at, and I think if she had won, then we'd be on
we would be in such.
I don't even want to go there. It'll make my blood boil, but this election, everything was hinging on this
let's
election.
Celebrate the win and not go to what could have happened.
Please.
But we keep learning, and they're exposing more things. We're learning every day. I mean, this past week, how many different scandals did they expose that they were covering up, right? From the plandemic, that's another C word I can't say, so I'll just say plandemic. From that little bug that we had that caused such a ruckus for 4 years, we're now finding there was tons of cover up with that shot. There's tons of cover up with the side effects and information there.
Completely.
You got the Afghan exit. They're calling for a deep dive investigation of that because what was the call there?
Yes.
I mean, there was so many things that we at this network reported on, and then we were told we were mis and disinformation. Now that there's a new administration and they're digging into the computers and the files and everything else, they're now exposing all of this crap that happened. But again, I want to go back to why you and I are allowed to sit here and do what we do, and the millions of Americans are allowed to live the free lives they live. And today's Friday, and this weekend, we know what's coming up. Nobody's going to work on Monday, except you have to, if you're in one of those jobs, but a majority of us are going to be off for Memorial Day.
That's right.
What are you supposed to do on Memorial Day? Have a barbecue and have the day off and party with your friends and get drunk and not go to work?
Yeah, well, that's what a lot of people think it's about, and maybe there's some place for that, but you have to remember the real reason for the season.
Thank you.
This is not like Halloween. This is not. This is right up there with Independence Day. This is just as important.
We got to remember, this day coming up on Monday, Memorial Day, is actually a sad day.
Yes, it is.
For millions of Americans.
It is.
Who have lost their loved ones over the centuries in battle defending this constitutional republic.
Completely.
You're never going to hear me say
it's very, very humbling.
Yeah.
To think about.
And so when we're out partying this weekend, when you're out having fun, when you're not going to work, just remember, there's a spouse somewhere grieving. There's some kids that are either little or adult now that years ago or just a few years ago or decades ago lost a loved one on a battlefield. So let's remember that when you're having a good time, because, and I hate when I hear somebody say, oh, why do you use that cheesy phrase? This ain't a cheesy phrase. Freedom isn't free.
Completely.
Okay? It took a lot of young men and women with guts for an all-volunteer force to raise that hand, put the other hand on that Bible, and say, I will go defend her against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I did it 32 years ago in 1992. Oof. It was a while ago. But our special guest tonight, he might have done it a couple years before me. I think we're about the same age. Maybe not. Maybe I did it before. Maybe I'm older. I don't know. I better not put my foot in my mouth.
We'll find out.
But I'm very excited to bring on our guest tonight. And this guy, he and I did not know each other up until just a few months ago. But we had a lot of mutual friends. And we got connected through the veteran community. This is how it goes, right? I was talking to a vet buddy of mine in the Carolinas, I think, about all of the horrible FEMA coverage and how they weren't under Joe Biden helping our fellow Americans recover after the big hurricanes and storms and tropical storms, right? And I said, I'm launching a podcast and we're looking for some sponsors. And he was like, well, the guys from the Grunt Style Foundation, and I didn't even know, I'll admit it, that there was this massive foundation that helps all these veterans issues in this country for years. I just knew Grunt Style as the really cool merch. I love their merch. They got an awesome logo, and their hats and shirts are cool, and the phrases on them, and it all supports veterans causes. So being an Air Force vet, I'm like, gung-ho, let's do it, right? So I started talking to our guest tonight about the sponsorship. Then I learned more about him, the foundation, and I was blown away. And I was like, this is a partnership made in heaven. Because what these guys do to help our vets, because let's be real, the VA falls short in a lot of ways.
Yes.
I'm not going to throw them all under the bus because there's some hardworking people at the VA that do try to help our veterans. And we have helped millions of veterans over the decades through the VA.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of shortcomings.
Yes.
You've covered them on your show. I've covered them on my show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you hear some of these horror stories from veterans, and it just breaks your heart. It really does. And I think at some point it became, like any other bureaucracy, right? It became more about self-preservation
There you go.
than the mission itself.
There we
That's
go.
the problem.
So without further ado, he's the top dog, the president, the big guy over at Grunt Style Foundation. And I'm pretty sure, because you never say former, I think I taught you that, Riley, right?
That's right.
Okay. When you're talking about Marines, don't say former, unless they did like 20 or more and they retired. You could say retired Marine. But if they just did their tour and they got out, they don't like being called former. It's kind of, Air Force guys, us Chair Force guys, us Zoomies, and the squids in the Navy, and the grunts in the Army, and the coasties in the Coast Guard. You could say former and we don't get all upset about it. But Marines are really radical about being Marines. So never say former. Here's Marine, president of the Grunt Style Foundation, Tim Jensen, joining the Anchormen podcast. What's up, big dog? Did I get that right with you jarheads? You never say former, right?
I think you painted a very nice introduction, my friend. And, I would be remiss to say that, the Air Force has the greatest looking Raider uniforms that the services could ask for.
That's the only compliment we ever get. You guys got nice uniforms. Actually, you know what's funny? Tim, you're dressed blues with the blood stripe down the side. I'm sorry, and the dark jacket. That's the most badass uniform in the United States military of all branches. Bar none, the dress blues of the Corps. They look hardcore, and I love it. And Tim, I was almost a Marine, right? Did you want to have that chat?
I hear that story a lot of people that aren't Marines.
Oh, here we go. No.
Whoa.
Now, yeah, he's going to call me out. See? I bring it up. Now I'm going to get...
You got the floor. Here's your... You got to set the record straight here.
Well, I told everybody on the first episode, 12, 13 episodes ago, how I got into broadcast journalism was being a journalist in the military, right? Working for AFARTS, Armed Forces Radio Television Service, which Tim, I'm sure, is familiar with. Tim, go back to the wide shot, bring Tim back on. Tim... if I could find the recruiter, I would bring up facts so you would know I'm not BSing you.
We need a witness.
Junior year in high school, it's a year after Desert Storm 1. I had an appointment with a Marine recruiter in Defiance, Ohio to sign up to be a Marine Corps sniper with 2 or 3 other of my buddies from high school. Petey Graham, Davey Workman, and Billy Sullivan. We were all going to go in and be jarheads like you, Tim. And the Marine Corps recruiter was late to my appointment. And so the Air Force recruiter sat a little 17-year-old down, Tim, and started asking me what I like to do. And he found out I was DJing parties and doing radio commercials at 17 in my hometown.
DJing?
Yeah.
I didn't know that part.
Oh, like little piddly stuff with a buddy of mine that had a little kit and a trailer, and we went around and did stuff. Anyway, point being is, your Marine was late, and the Air Force recruiter sat me down and started asking me personal questions because they're salesmen. And when he found out I liked doing radio and TV and DJing, he said, have you seen the movie Good Morning Vietnam? And I said, yes. And he said, would you like to do that job instead of being a sniper? I'm 17, Tim. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, you get to carry a camera and a gun. And if we go to combat, you'll use both. And I'm like, ooh. He's like, so you're entertaining and informing the troops while you're at the front lines documenting what they're doing. But obviously, if you get shot at, you pick the gun up, not the camera. And I'm like, well, damn, that sounds fun. And I switched in 10 minutes. So it was not I didn't want to be a Marine, or I was scared to be a Marine, or I didn't like the Marines. I got sold a better bill of goods when I was 17 years old. That was 33 years ago. I'm 51 this year. Wow. By the way, when did you go in the Corps? Let's talk about you.
I joined the Marine Corps in the hot summer months of July 1997.
Oh, crap, I am older.
Wow.
Yeah, you're just a little bit older, my friend.
Yeah,
And
I joined
yeah, but
92, went in delayed entry. They didn't take me till June of 93. But go ahead, sir.
there you go. There you go. Yeah, it's a delayed entry program myself.
Nice.
My recruiter said he was infantry, and then I met him in the fleet, and he was a mail clerk. So that was fun. But I did some time both active duty and the reserves as an amphibious assault vehicle crewman was my original MOS, and then I ended my time as an infantryman after a deployment in Iraq 2004 2005 with a reserve unit from Chicago.
That was some tough times back 04, 05. You think about
Well, you know,
we
yeah, it
started
was
them in
a war
01
for
in
sure.
Afghanistan, and then Iraq came a year or two later. These were 21 and or 22 and 21-year wars. And in 04, 05, I remember there was some of the nastiest, dirtiest fighting and some hell on earth there. So thank you, brother, for your service, and thanks for that year in that hell. And we'll get to Afghanistan as well in the exit in a minute, because I want to ask your opinion about what's happening currently with that. But let's keep going. I like chronological timeline when I do these, right? It makes it easier for everybody to follow along. So how many years did you serve total?
So I did four active duty, and then I did about four, well, a little over four in the reserves.
Okay.
It was just a total time of just over eight. And yeah, there was an opportunity to go back to Iraq and after that first deployment, but they were going to be doing FOB security, and I'm like coming off a great deployment where you're doing your job, like sitting on the fob did not seem like an ideal situation. And I had a 1-year-old son that was born while I was away as well. So, you know, I think it was a good time for me to shift gears into being a father and started.
Wow.
I love that,
life.
Tim. You know what?
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second before we go on with your life, because your foundation does so much to help our brothers and sisters in arms. Talk about how I think a lot of Americans forget, and maybe on this Memorial Weekend, that they'll remember a little bit.
Yeah.
We always say, remember the fallen and remember our active duty. And you know who gets forgotten? And Tim knows what I'm going to say. The families back home. They're serving too. They've got to serve while that guy or gal is over there in uniform fighting, right? The husband, the wife's back home, the brothers, the sisters, the moms, the dads, fretting, worrying, freaking out, running family businesses, farms, you name it, picking up the slack because they're overseas, raising the kids. And Tim, we always forget about the families a lot, don't we, in this country?
Yeah, it's we see it time and time again with all these deployments, especially during the 20-year war and that cycle was going. You know, I know guys that deployed like you were gone for 45 months. Like that's a significant long period of time to be away from your family.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, how do you build relationships with your children? You know, and it's a mindset. You know, one of the things that put me into a spin out when I came back was, you know, like I wasn't a father. I didn't know how to be a father. I was, you know, being trained to destroy life for the last, you know, X amount of years of my life, and then actually applying it, and then coming back to this, you know, this little boy that I had made before I left, and now I have to be a nurturer, and I didn't know how to do any of that, and you know, my life took an incredible spin out of control, and made a series of bad decisions, and you know, spun out, and you know, it's the traditional the horror stories of being put on, you know, prescription medicines from the VA.
Oh,
That's
Well, put me in a bad place.
So Tim, how did you break out of that cycle and sort of get back to equilibrium?
Oh, yeah, that's it was a long, arduous journey. You know, it was a couple of years of, you know, floating through that space. You know, I couldn't sleep at the time. I was a carpenter in the city of Chicago. You know, so I worked during the day. I took a job bouncing at a bar at night, and you know, doing what I knew best, and that was hurting people. And you know,
good place to take out aggression. Stupid drunk people.
It really was. And
I hate to make light of it, but if you got to take it out on somebody, it's better to take it out on dumb drunk people causing a problem than somebody in your family or a friend or a loved one. So,
or yourself.
Again, I'm not supposed to
No, of course.
I have to condemn violence. Anyway,
right. No
right. Condemn violence, even though they train military members for violence, but condemn violence. All right, Tim. So you get back.
Yeah, so you know, I was doing all that, and you know, it wasn't helping. I was slipping further and further down all the medicine and the alcohol mixing with all that. Lost my wife, got into a divorce. You know, pretty much lost everything. and by the grace of God, found a person that saved my life. Pulled me out of all of that, got me away from all the prescriptions. I started using cannabis as a supplement, and that was almost 15 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, let's get into that. Let's pause on your story, Tim, because I got a lot of questions now. I just made some notes, and these are things that we wanted to bring up because I feel like this is a great time, Memorial Day weekend, to bring these things up and talk about the issues that our veterans are dealing with, right? And there's so many issues. Tim, you've been on my talk show. You and I have talked offline as well. The government tells us that there's about 22 a day that are taking their lives. But every charity group, every nonprofit, Tim, you, people I've spoken to that are actually out there on the ground trying to prevent these suicides. That's the key. Suicide prevention for our warriors. I hear the numbers more like 45 to 50 a day. Tim, is that about right?
Yeah. Sadly, I believe that to be true. We have several people on our staff that have been doing a lot of research that can validate these numbers, and in a way that is what we're talking about is the challenge is there's only about 20 some states that report suicides and do an investigation through autopsy, and that becomes statistical data.
Right.
So we have a large portion of the country that is not reporting these things. So we don't really know what the true data.
That's why it's low. Okay. Right? I didn't know that was the factor. That's why we're not reporting them all. Yep. So it's not the fact they're not happening, folks. They're happening. They're just not being reported.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
It's disgusting.
I think there's some graphics they can bring up too. Let's spin that then, because you just brought up a good point about how you avoided going down that spiral after the divorce and everything, because I have a feeling, Tim, you, like millions of our veterans, you got the usual prescription at the VA. And the usual prescription is a prescription. So you go in, you say, I'm depressed, I'm having suicidal thoughts, because of the war, I got PTSD or traumatic brain injury. What do I do? And the first thing they do, instead of counseling, get you in touch with battle buddies so you can try and talk it out. Oh, I don't know, maybe go to church, talk with your family members, get some like that, do some holistic healing stuff, some meditation, some praying. No, they go, here's some drugs. By the way, the drugs have side effects. You know what some of the side effects of these drugs we're going to give you are? Suicidal thoughts.
Well, that's
so we overprescribe and we kill our heroes. So Tim, and sorry to interrupt, Riley, I'll give this one to you as well. I just want to hear Tim talk about the alternatives, because there's been a lot of research and there's a lot of folks in the military veteran community now using alternative, and I'm not going to use medication or drug because that's not the word for these. They're using alternative things like cannabis. Which is an herb, not a drug. And Tim, tell them the success rate, because I have had people on my talk show in the veteran community who have used it or have buddies that have used it, and they've gotten off the prescription meds 100%, and they tell me their quality of life is 1,000 times better.
Yeah, we see it over and over and over again. Anecdotally, I could say, most people that get off of, these psychotropics using cannabis live a better life, right? Anecdotally, there's plenty of data that shows that these uses of plant-based medicines are highly effective and have a higher efficacy rate, into these mental health problems, right? Because what you're talking about is, the strategy and the standard is you go into the VA, you communicate your problem, you walk out with Zoloft, trazodone, and maybe some gabapentin. And, you can talk to every veteran, and that is the prescription. So there's clearly a strategy that's coming from Big Pharma that is working with the VA to make these drugs because available for everybody, because over 68% of veterans in the VHA right now, like my friends, 68% or better are on psychotropics. That means that they're on SSRIs. So we are putting
almost 7 in 10.
Yeah, that's all we do is write them a script, Riley. And Tim, what the hell sense they even make? Hi, I'm thinking about harming myself. So a doctor, do no harm, that's your Hippocratic Oath, then gives me a drug where a side effect is I might harm myself. What are we doing?
Yeah. Well, I think
there's-
it's a cash cow, right? Tim?
it's a cash
of
cow,
course.
right?
Duh. Yep.
You can't escape that. I think it's just like a little peek in to, let's put our tinfoil hats on for one moment. I have friends up in Canada that I've been working with. I've been part of the burn pit situation in the veteran community. We got legislation passed with the PACT Act. We're an integral part of getting that done. We've created many friends, part of the Five Eyes, network of collaborating nations that are all experiencing the same cancers. We just happen to work closely with our Canadian friends up north, and they are telling me, I had a gentleman on my podcast talking about this. There is a service in Canada called the MAID service that is calling veterans and saying, hey guys, it's probably better that you just take your life.
I've heard this.
What the hell? Wait, what?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Right.
it
So,
falls within
to
the
think
bigger
that-
context. Yeah, because they encourage that. Just
I mean, I know Canada in general, for all their citizens, now made it legal and allowed that you can end your life, right, legally in Canada.
I don't know if they have legalization for assisted suicide.
I thought they did.
They've pushed that very hard.
Some of
absolutely,
their, what do they call their provinces or whatever the heck, they don't call them states.
provinces,
I thought some of their areas did approve that, where
think
you
so.
could do it. Because there was a headline the other day that and now places in the UK, whether it was Germany, France, England, they were talking about there's a couple that wanted to do it. I mean,
Well, I think I've heard it for people who have chronic conditions like cancer, where it's stage 3 or stage 4.
right.
Instead of
but
living your
the
life,
slippery slope is
Yes.
in Canada and the UK and places of Europe, they're talking about if you just don't want to exist, if you're having a horrible quality of life, go do it.
Yes.
That is horrific.
yes, it is.
We're trying to prevent
Barbaric.
people from doing it. It's barbaric. Thank you,
barbaric.
Tim.
You're right about that.
We want to prevent people from feeling that they're in such desperation that life is so horrible that they have to end their life. And if you're giving them a drug that is only going to increase those thoughts, then what the hell is the VA doing? Tim, let me ask you about Secretary Collins. What do you think of him and President Trump's move to try and reform the VA and clean things up? I know that, running a charity, and I totally respect this, a lot of folks, especially in your position, stay away from politics, as you should, because most Americans, I hope most Americans, it doesn't matter their politics, they want to help our veterans. It should be an apolitical issue, right? Whether we're helping them get off the prescription drugs and not take their own lives, whether we're trying to get them out of poverty, off the street, the homelessness issue, off drugs whatever the problem is, this should be something where everyone can rally around, and we're seeing some images now of these brave souls that served our nation. Because let me tell you what, when I see these images, Tim, and I'll let you go off as well, man, do I get pissed. Because there shouldn't be one, and it's estimated there's 36,000. There might be more than 36,000, you tell me. But 36,000 homeless veterans, there shouldn't be one. If you serve this country, why would you come home and live on the streets of the country you defended? We should have programs set up, or just people in the kindness of their heart would say, oh, you were a veteran? Let's get you off the street because you served me. I should help you. Yes. Tim, go ahead.
Well, there's a couple questions in there, so I want to make sure I hit them all, right? So I think, from the homelessness side, let's wrap our heads around this dirty little number, right? There are roughly 40,000 homeless veterans in the United States right now. And there is a line item budget in the VA's suicide prevention spending of damn near $350 some million dollars. That they spend $50 million a year on veteran homelessness. Dan, if I gave you $50 million, would you be able to solve veteran homelessness? You don't need to answer that, because of course you would be able to. Anybody could solve veteran homelessness.
50 mil? And there's 40,000? Right? Yeah, right. I'm doing the math in my head. If I just gave them the cash and divided it, yes. But if I built some centers and I started some programs, yes. And I know that Trump just signed an executive order to take hundreds of millions of dollars we were using to house a bunch of the illegals, and they're going to build at least one, if not more. And I'm hoping, and I've been lobbying the White House personally, I want to see what he's building out in LA to house a bunch of homeless, because that's where a lot of the homeless veterans are. They go in the warmer climate. I want to see a bunch of those facilities, or give the money to U.S. vets or other charities, Grunt Style Foundation, that actually are helping get veterans off the streets, get them off the drugs, save their lives, and screw the government. Give the money to the nonprofits that actually, like you, Tim, are out there helping the vets.
Yeah, I'm often on Twitter, and I do like to mess with the government a lot, right? Because really the government sucks, right? I'm not a big fan of government.
I
I'm a
don't
fan of
disagree,
our
brother.
Constitution, right? The Constitution means everything to me, and that's all that matters.
Damn right.
But at the end of the day, I like to poke at the government, and I think that we have some very encouraging moments right now in the veteran community, right? We have a presidential administration that is highly focused on the veteran community, which is I'm so excited about. And I was part of Trump's Veteran Council in his first administration.
Oh, you
So
were? I didn't know that. Nice.
I was with them up in Fort Riley, Maryland, for the I forget what it was, the Republican nomination. It was an incredible time up at that fort. And so I'm totally encouraged, like that he knows what the problems are, he knows how to solve them, and the only way that Donald Trump knows how to solve them by being completely disruptive to a machine that is built for bullshit. Excuse my language.
Oh, you can say it. I don't care.
Now, the second part of that, Doug Collins, right? I think Doug Collins has an extraordinarily difficult task in front of him. He has what we would call in the military a soup sandwich, and unfortunately, he's going to have to figure out how to eat that.
Yeah.
But what he's been talking about, like he said at the 100-day cabinet meeting, and he said, Mr. President, we are looking at psychedelic assisted therapies. Mr. President, we're looking at HBOT. In my opinion, those are the only two important medical things that we need to be talking about in the veteran community at all. Like, and I know that's a hard position to take because there's a lot of things in the veteran community, and I'll probably get some hate mail about that. But at the end of the day, suicide is the number one problem. Right, we address the cancer.
Yeah, you just said almost 50.
Yeah.
And again, the reports I've read is 45. I don't care if it's 4 or 5 or 45 or 50. It's too damn many.
Yes.
And if they got a budget of billions of dollars, what's the VA doing with it? I mean, and
that's the real question.
Right.
Yeah.
What are you doing with all of that money?
20 years they've been spending. It's something to the tune of like $3 trillion. Like. Where
I mean,
like suicide should be
right, and as homeless veteran issues and the taking of their own lives of veterans, those two major issues, are either one of those, are those numbers way down after trillions of dollars, Tim?
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
Absolutely. We're talking.
This is the federal government.
The number of veterans that is believed to have taken their life over the last 20 years is in excess of 156,000 individuals. Wow. Brown University came out with their number of 30,133, and nobody holds that number to be true at all.
That's hard.
Right? So 156,000 of us have taken our lives, right? And then here's another one that will just blow your skull cap. Right. When it comes to hyperbaric oxygen therapy, most of the VA hospitals around the country have at least one of these things, and they could write scripts against it all day if they chose to, but they don't. And over 700,000 veterans within the last, call it 10, 15, 20 years, have died because of their lack of access to this due to their diabetic foot ulcer amputations. Now, with those amputations, you have the first 3 years of the most problematic periods. And if you get through that, your likelihood of survival is extraordinarily high. Getting hyperbaric chamber therapy within those first 3 years is extraordinarily bountiful in benefits to the patient, because it's driving highly enriched oxygenized blood to that area, which is helping the soft tissue regenerate and reduce inflammation and all the things that cause problems that would ultimately lead to a heart attack and death. But the VA doesn't give that for whatever.
And so wait, they've got that data. They could buy a bunch more of these chambers and put them in all the VAs everywhere, and even more than, but they don't. And how much do one of those cost? Not millions, thousands, tens of thousands.
My foundation has been giving them away for years, and I put them into the homes of veterans so they can do this in the privacy of their home. They can collapse it.
But I'll bet you the VA's got a big fat budget for their coffee and snack bar and their salaries and their travel and all that BS and their buildings, but we can't actually pay for things that would help our veterans have a better quality of life. Tim, let's get back to you and get back on the timeline, because I want to get to Grunt Style and how you got to be the top dog at this amazing foundation. So we got the Tim Marine story. We're up to several years back. Where does and how does Grunt Style get created, founded, and you get involved, whatever? I don't know. I didn't look up any of the background yet, so you got to fill me in right now.
Absolutely. So I'll take the short walk. After I left the union, my life was starting to get a little bit better. I got off the medicine. My life has stabilized. I get into college. I'm pursuing a degree in game theory and design, so video games and all sorts of stuff like that.
Oh.
And I'm doing really well there. Start a couple of businesses. They don't do so well. I'm just learning at that time period of like how to be an entrepreneur. And I almost signed a big contract with Hasbro for a Nerf video game.
No kidding.
That would have been cool.
Wow.
But that didn't work out. And, I had a comic book business going at the same time, and did a lot of work for like C2E2 and, just cool stuff, published 7 comic books. But then I got married, and my new wife was like, Tim, I love that you're pursuing the things that, mean so much to you, but they're not making money, and we need,
You're like, yeah, she's like, hey, daddy, you got to pay the bills. You're the man of the house, boy. Let's go.
Right.
Chop, chop. Show your worth.
Yeah,
Isn't that funny how we always get that message?
Yes.
Women, make that man show you he's worthy. You got to show that worth, Tim. Hey, this is the Anchormen podcast, okay?
That's right.
This is for men. Go ahead, Tim.
That's right. So she's working at Metro
for that one.
She's working at Metro at the time, which is the downtown train system for Chicago. And she was like, if anything, I'll get you a job being a train conductor, and it's a union job, and you can get back in the union and do that. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do any of that. Blah. And I'm searching for all these types of jobs, and I'm down to like doing jobs at Toys R Us, like looking for warehouse jobs, right? Because I didn't want to stop doing all my art stuff. And then I finally see this ad for Grunt Style, and I'm like, oh, wow. I read all these things. I'm like, hey, that's like speaking to me. So I go there, bring my portfolio, I get an interview. The founder, interviews me, looks at my stuff. He's like, not what I'm looking for, and sends me on my way. I'm
Whoa.
like, oh,
how many
crap.
years ago was this? And was the Grunt Style, so you were applying at the foundation? What came first? Were the guys that founded it making the merch, or they started the foundation then added the merch? Give me the background behind that.
Yeah, so we started the business. The business started first. That started in 2009.
Oh, okay.
And then the foundation started in 2021.
Oh, not till then.
Later, yeah.
So you were interviewing for the merch side years back then.
Wow.
So then, all right, catch us up to date then. How do you get in the foundation where years later you're the boss man?
Yeah, so I take the job. I get turned down. I'm driving home, and the owner calls me. He's like, "Hey, I was really impressed with you. There's another job opportunity for you." I'm like, "Great! I can't go home without telling my wife I don't have a job."
I have a job.
So he's like, I was like, "What's the job?" He's like, "Folding T-shirts." I'm like, "I'll take it." He's like, "Do you want to know how much you're making?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. I don't care." Like, come back on Monday. Right. So I show up there, and that's like the beginning of the end, right? Or the beginning of the beginning, really.
There you go.
I started, I saw nothing but opportunities. So I'm working 8 hours a day folding T-shirts. I'm clocking out. I'm putting an extra 4 to 6 hours in every night, just doing extra stuff because, the company hadn't even made $1 million at that point. We were really new, right? And, so things just needed to be done, and there was not enough money to pay everybody for all the work that needed to be done. So, those of us that rolled our sleeves up that are still here.
Decided I'll do the work whether I'm paid or not because I'm a hard damn worker and I'm dedicated.
I'm just dedicated, right?
So then you're there for years folding shirts and working on the merch side. They come up rather with a foundation only 4 or 5 years ago.
No. I grow all the way up through Grunt Style. I held pretty much every job in that business.
See?
I'm now a
That's
co-owner.
what I like. Staying loyal, and it pays off.
Yes.
And now he's the president of the foundation. And you know what? I look at like Dan Scavino with Trump. He was Trump's caddy 23, 24 years ago. And then he worked up. He got this position, that position, this position. Now he's chief of staff in the White House in the United States of America.
Yeah.
And he was a caddy.
Yeah.
He stayed loyal, and he worked his ASS off.
Yep.
This guy was loyal to the brand, worked his butt off, and now he's the president of an amazing foundation with a very big budget, Tim, and you're able to do so much for veterans. So now we're up to date. Fill them in on what the foundation does for veterans.
Yeah, so we are really focused on veteran first responder law enforcement. We, are really stepping in the gaps on mental health, food insecurities.
Thank you.
And transition assistance. Right, those are the three biggest areas that we see that are the real slippery slopes that that are putting these individuals into a suicidal state. Right, so we try to swim upstream, do a lot of the work that gets people into those positions before they start slipping into that. Most recently, we brought the Reverend Warriors, which is a large 501c3. We acquired them and brought them into our organization. So they are now the sole suicidal prevention program within the Grunt Style Foundation.
Great.
Are delivering hyperbaric chambers to veterans all across the United States. We've delivered 15 so far over the course of the years, and these are 1.5 ATA based systems that go into your home with an oxygenizer, the whole tube, the whole thing. And when you're done, you just fold it up and slide it under your bed. So we do a lot of work there. Food insecurities. Over the last 2 years, we delivered, get this, guys, like over 100 tons of food to active duty military, because active duty military under the Biden administration was on food stamps. 1 in 4 families were on food stamps.
Can you hear that? Let me just, I remember covering that. Tim, you and I didn't know each other, but I remember saying that. It was about 2-3 years ago, because we didn't give them any raises. Trump just gave the troops a massive raise, by the way, right, Tim? One of the biggest raises we've seen in decades. Thank you, Mr. President. There were troops living on military bases with a wife and 3 kids who got paid so low while defending our nation and freedoms that they had to get, on food stamps.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's a slap, just like a homeless vet living on the street that he defended. They're all slaps in the face. That is BS that you would have to get on food stamps because your family can't afford to eat while you're a United States Marine. Air Force, Navy. This is
insane. It's betrayal. So, Tim, with these veterans you're serving, how do you find them? Because I would imagine it's a lot of word of mouth, referrals. I mean, this is a tight-knit community, but I'm wondering, how do you get to these people that really need your help?
Well, that's a great question. What we are very scientific, right? One thing that is great about all military people is that we will exhaust all of our resources to understand the problem and then throw all those resources against the problem. So how we did that was, especially within the food insecurity side, was we took a RAND report that did a study on all of the military installations around the United States that are around impoverished areas. So when you've got a PCS family, which is being talked about by Hegseth right now, you got a family coming from one base to another base where the spouse might have had a job in the other area, is coming to this new socially depressed, city, town, whatever the case may be.
And she can't or he can't get a job.
Now there's only one income family, right?
That's a great point,
what
Tim.
we have started identifying. So we're hitting up all of these cities across the United States. We started in Jacksonville, North Carolina, of all places, where I spent most of my time in the Marine Corps. And we started there and started moving our way back towards Texas and helping as many cities in between. When it comes to our hyperbaric chambers, we put the word out. We do a lot of word of mouth on that because that we found is, the best form of this type of medicine to get that into the hands of people that desperately need it. Especially within the military crowd. We have a whole protocol that goes along with our therapies with that. Identifying the heavy metals and the toxins in your body, how to chelate them and get them out, then getting you into a protocol, hyperbaric protocol, coupled with IR lighting. And then if, we are still having some issues with the individual that, could be around mental health or things of that nature, then we lift them up into psychedelic assisted therapy or PAT. Right?
Okay.
Wonderful stuff, man. I love learning all this about this foundation. And in a short amount of time, did you say 2021?
2021, we went hot.
I mean, see? Yeah. But this is how the community comes together, right, Tim? Veterans helping veterans. Because we all know as vets, you sit around waiting on the federal government to help you. you're going to be waiting a long time. Don't hold your breath or you'll be gone because it's the federal government.
Look at what happened in North Carolina, and that's how we got connected, right?
Yes, that's how we met.
Our dear friend that we both mutually know. I was watching all of that from here in San Antonio, San Antonio, Texas. I grew up in North Carolina. I graduated high school in that state.
Oh yeah, our mutual buddy Chad Canton. He's a Navy Seabee retired veteran. Yeah, Navy Seabee. He was down there using his skills to help rebuild. Tim went down with the foundation to bring some money to help rebuild and help the veterans in that community that got their houses destroyed and whatever. And then that's how we got connected. Because we were like, hey, wait a minute. FEMA's dropping the ball under the Biden regime on this. What about veterans issues? They're dropping the ball. Tim, come on the show. And then this partnership with the podcast and then the appearances on the talk show all kind of just fell into place. Wow. So many more questions, Tim. We're going to run out of time. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just real quick, if you remember what was going on during that time period, it was mostly retired special forces from Bragg living up in the foothills there that were running all those operations because the government was too feckless to do anything about it. Yeah. And brought veterans from all across the country, right? And that's truly, Dan, and is what I love the most here is like, I'm blessed to be part of like this veteran community that is willing to just drop everything in need when the country needs us, right? Like at a moment's notice. It doesn't matter if you're in the deepest parts of Spokane, Washington, or the driest parts of Phoenix, Arizona. Like something happens in this country, the veterans react.
Well, yeah, Tim, think about it. What other organization of people, of Americans, when the shit hits the fan, has to come together and do more with less than active duty military? Yeah? Come on. They give you old tanks, old planes, a little budget, not enough people, and say, go kick ass. And we always do. We're the biggest and best on the planet. And so it would make sense that when we retire and you need something, the veteran community steps up because we know how to do it with less. Right? And get it done and cut through tape because you're in the military. You don't worry about that crap. You ain't got time for that. And speaking of red tape and BS in the military, I want to get your take with only about 10 minutes left here in the podcast on a few things happening in our nation's capital related to active duty, which then transcribes down to veterans and stuff that you'll help with. And the first and foremost is we have a new SecDef. Some people love him. Some people hate him. I particularly really thoroughly enjoy watching Pete Hegseth dismantle the woke garbage in our active duty military and try to clean things up. And Tim, prior to the Trump administration taking over, we had some of the lowest recruiting numbers for every single branch that we have seen since post-Vietnam when nobody wanted to go in and we were forced them to go in. There was a draft, okay? You're too young to remember, Riley. I was a little kid. Tim, I think, was barely born. But anyway, 'cause I'm only 4 or 5 years older than him. But my point to all this is, since Trump took over, we now have the highest numbers we've seen since like World War II when Americans wanted to go to war and beat the Germans and the Japanese, right? Mm-hmm. All the difference was a president and a SecDef, and now numbers are up. And I'm going to run a quick clip, but I got to give credit to Tim and his jarheads. The Marine Corps was the only one that met their recruiting goals during Biden. I had to throw that in. Really? They did meet recruiting goals every year because when people want to be Marines, they want to be Marines, right, Tim?
And we passed our budget. The only ones that passed the budget.
That's right. The Marine Corps and the Marine Commandant always passes his budget, yet the Pentagon hasn't passed an audit in, 7-8 years, Tim?
Yeah, I think longer than that.
Yeah, they can't pass an audit. Anyway, speaking of cleaning up the fraud, waste, and abuse, the DEI woke nonsense instead of just worried about being trained killers so that we can prevent wars by being the biggest and best. I love this speech about a week or two ago. Hegseth was addressing a bunch of troops at a dinner on a base, and he said this.
We are leaving wokeness and weakness behind. No more pronouns, no more climate change obsession, no more emergency vaccine mandates, no more dudes in dresses. We're done with that shit. We're done with that shit. That's the Secretary of Defense. Wow.
What a difference, night and day, from a big old Lloyd Austin 4-star general boy who did whatever he was supposed to do to the good old boys in the swamp and listened and bow down to them with woke garbage that, I'm sorry, makes our fighting force weak. Tim, I was talking to a Navy vet gal here in San Diego a while back, and I said, what do you do? And she was and I'll probably get the terminology incorrect, so I won't go there, but she loaded the weaponry on a destroyer. She was down underneath. She's loading the weapons, right? And I said, how's it going in that job? She goes, it sucks. I'm always on land in some classroom doing DEI crap instead of on my ship training for war. This is a 27-year-old female. She got it. But Lloyd Austin and Joe Biden and other folks in Washington, D.C. want to worry more about making sure a person in a dress feels comfortable in the Marine Corps, the Army, the Air Force, instead of what the military was created for in the first place. We are a deterrent, and if we don't deter, then we are the most lethal fighting force on the planet. And you've heard Pete say it. That's the only two things we should be concerned with. Tim?
Yeah, I definitely agree. You know, I think the American public, we got too comfortable with war over the last 20 years, right? Through Iraq, Afghanistan, the global war on terror, largely the American public operated like they didn't even know the war was happening. And
it was sad.
With all of that, we have taken our eye off the ball of what is really important in this country. And, that is that, we have to have a strong defense. We have to have a war fighter that's willing to do the hard things that is necessary in combat, because, the dirty secret here is that war is not fun. War is not Hollywood. War is not something that I wish upon anybody.
No.
When my son joined the military after me having my combat experience, it was a hard thing for me to do. I have great pride in my son, in the choices that he made, but it is a hard decision for me to make, knowing that he is willing to give his life, and there may be a time that he has to do that, and I have to come to terms with it.
Yeah.
But there are many in this country that just don't understand that, and we've gotten again too comfortable with this idea of war and the romanticism of it.
Completely.
So that when we look at the military as a whole, it's easy for us to say, oh, you know what? Yeah, there's inequality happening everywhere, blah, 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 because, we're looking at it the wrong way because we've gotten soft. We've gotten
right. And Tim,
all these things.
Tell them, we don't have time for that crap in uniform. You and I and the rest of us that served, we didn't care about anybody's color, religion, or any of that crap. When you're in, we're all green. You're not black, you're not brown, you're not white, you're not yellow or red, you're green. We all wear green uniforms, all right? We're green. And on the inside, we're red, white, and blue.
That's right. And it's not to say that racism doesn't exist.
Of course not. I'm not. Yeah, of course not. It exists everywhere.
But at the end of the day, what is different about the camaraderie that's built of all shapes, colors, and sizes in the military is that when you're sharing a foxhole or a fighting position together, nobody cares what color you are. Nobody cares what sexual orientation you are.
Thank you, Tim.
Well, that's worried. Are you going to get me when we need to kill those people?
Yeah. You got my 6, I got your 6. Get the bad guy.
I just wish that mindset, though, would apply to Washington and to the government, because that's the whole problem, is that camaraderie seems isolated.
They don't get it because they never served.
Of course.
But how many people we got in the House right now that have served? Only a couple. How many senators? Only a couple.
Of course. And again,
come on.
They've turned war into a business. It's a cash cow. They make tons of money off
the military-industrial complex.
It's very real.
We're getting close on time. I got 2 more big ones we got to get in with Tim before we lose him.
Yeah.
And the one is, you heard SecDef this week call for a thorough investigation into the Afghanistan exit that killed 13 of our brothers and sisters. I just wanted to get your take on that. And then I want to hit Memorial Day before we say goodnight to you, Tim. But your thoughts on that, because now that we've learned that Joe Biden has turbo cancer, that the cancer treatment most likely affected his cognitive skills, which we already knew the cognitive skills were declining when he allegedly won. And now there's generals coming out and saying, yeah, we questioned some of the calls he was making about Afghanistan, but we did it because he's the commander in chief. So now we're all revisiting Afghanistan going, holy cow. Was it because Joe wasn't there and other people behind the scenes were pulling the strings that they did this shoddy exit that allowed us to leave 80-some billion in equipment, 13 dead Marine and Navy folks, And, oh, by the way, the Taliban takes back over, and now that big, beautiful runway and airport we built there in northern Afghanistan, I hear China's got control of that. I mean, this one would be another good acronym to use here, Tim, and I know you know it, FUBAR.
Yeah.
It's FUBAR, brother.
There's nothing that could be said positively about what happened in Afghanistan, that pullout, from the stuff that was happening at Bagram, from the Marines to the private contractors that were trying to get people out. I helped raise a bunch of money for people that were going in and helping during that time period. $280,000 we raised to help people get over there and do that stuff. And it's incredible. But at the end of the day, it's an echo of Vietnam all over again. Saigon, the fall of Saigon. This time we just didn't tell our allies that we were going to be leaving in the middle of the night, so we left everybody out high and dry. Yeah. This time around. And that's unfortunate because, when we think about some of these special forces operators, right? I have a lot of Green Beret friends and Delta guys. These people are on the ground building some of the most incredibly important relationships, that help big army and the big military force through, tribal relations or, getting intel, whatever you can imagine, some of these people are involved in. And we broke every one of those relationships when we exited Afghanistan the way that we did.
Oh, and it sent a message around the world, Tim. That was the big problem. I mean, come on. Putin was threatening while Trump was in to go into Ukraine. He didn't do it. The minute Joe took over and 7-8 months into his presidency, we do Afghanistan. What's frickin' Putin do? And everybody else started flexing around the globe. China on Taiwan, Middle East, Iran flexing, totally. Obviously Hamas attacking Israel. All that crap happened because when you're the United States of America and we're the world police and your commander-in-chief shows weakness, the bad guys come out of the woodworks. And speaking of bad guys and good guys, this is why I want to end this podcast and end on a positive note about something that is not positive, and that is the death of our brave service members. On Monday, we memorialize them on Memorial Day. I think we should do that way more than one day a year, but that's all we get, Tim, just kind of like Veterans Day. There's months for other crap, all kinds of months, but veterans, you get a day. Dead soldiers, you get a day. Anywho, I want Tim to chime in on what people who did not serve especially should be doing on Memorial Day. And the barbecues are fine, the day off's great, the partying's whatever, but let's try to remember what this day's about, right, Tim?
That's absolutely right. I think everybody has their own way of celebrating Memorial Day. I celebrate my own way by taking my family to visit all the men that didn't come home with me from Iraq. I've been doing that for many, many years, since the 20th year that we're celebrating here. Many subs had deployed. But, there are a lot of things that you can do at home, right? You can take that moment and just tip your head or call your family together and have a prayer, but give that thanks to those individuals that are willing to give their life, right? Because, the incredible thing about America is that there are men and women of this nation that are willing to die for a single piece of paper. Think about that.
That's right.
A piece of paper that gives us the ability to govern ourselves in a way that gives us freedom, right? That is so incredible. That is worth, I think, taking 5 minutes, 5 seconds.
Thank you.
5 hours.
Nowhere else on this rock, nowhere else do they do what we do. Seriously. Think about that. An all-volunteer force. We raise our hand. We swear allegiance. We're going to fight them all, foreign and domestic. There's plenty of domestic these days. And then if we lose our lives, it's for that piece of paper, this nation, our people, the American people. I love it. Tim, let's close out with you giving a big, huge pitch for your foundation. And I'm going to give a big thank you for helping to sponsor our podcast because it helps keep the lights on and whiskey in my glass. So.
Yeah. Most important thing.
Yeah. Don't self-soothe with that. Get help if you need it. I shouldn't make jokes about whiskey. But no, seriously, the foundation, make that pitch. How do they find you? What's the website, social media handles? How can they donate? Because you do so much amazing work for veterans. I want Grunt Style Foundation to blow up even bigger than it already is, Tim.
Well, Dan, you're an incredible soul, and I appreciate the opportunity. The Grunt Style Foundation, you can find us at gruntstylefoundation.org, where you can learn all of the projects that we are working on, the things that are important to us, and where we're putting our time, money, and effort in the veterans' needs of this country, to include the first responder and law enforcement. You can also join us for our War Cry for Change, which we'll be putting forward on Monday, which is really bringing a lens to the overprescribing problem that's happening within the veteran community.
Yes, thank you.
We are going to really drive that home on June 5th, where we're going to be holding a press conference and a summit sponsored by the Office of Senator Moran at the Capitol Building Conference Center, and then a press conference sponsored by Senator Bergman speaking to this issue as well. So we would love for everybody to help and join. The VFW, DAV, Wounded Warriors are great partners of ours along on this adventure. And, if you feel so inclined to donate, we would be grateful for any dollar that helps us continue the mission with this suicide prevention platform that we are building to end suicides within the veteran community once and for all. And I believe now is the time. We have a great administration and a very eager secretary that can make this go away.
Amen. Doug Collins.
Wow.
Pete Hegseth, Mr. President, we're calling all three of you. Let's fix this problem with veterans. It should be zero taking their lives. It should be zero living on the streets of America. And you three guys can get it done in your 4-year term. I know you can. Besides donating directly to the foundation, Tim, they can buy cool merch. This helps fund the foundation, right? I mean, that's the driving force behind the foundation, is buying the merch too, correct?
Yes, yes, indeed. You can go to gruntstyle.com and get all of your patriotic veteran merch that itches that patriotic need of yours. It's always backed by the Grunt Style beer guarantee. So if you rip it, stain it, tear it, for the life of the product, you can send it back and we will return it at no cost to you.
Oh, I stained this shirt. Oh no, I need a new shirt.
It's like a commercial.
Tim Jensen, the boss, the prez over at Grunt Style Foundation. Thank you, man, for giving us an hour tonight to talk about these amazing things that y'all are doing over there, but more importantly, the issues that are facing our veterans that are not getting enough attention at the federal level. And that's why charity groups like this pick up the slack, and we need more of them. So donate. It's Grunt Style Foundation or gruntstyle.com for the merch. Tim, thank you so much. I hope we can continue our partnership here on the Anchormen podcast. God bless you, brother. Have a great Memorial Day with your family and paying tribute to our fallen. God bless you.
Hoorah.
Hoorah. Jarheads. Hoorah. Yeah. Hoorah, Jarhead. I love Tim.
Do they really have the best uniforms?
Have you seen it?
I mean, but like, is that widely agreed upon?
That's the first. I think he was being nice because he's on here saying the Air Force one looks good. Yeah, our dress blues does look really sharp. The Army's, the Navy's, just kidding. Coasties, Yeah. I got to admit, the officers' uniforms in the Navy, those dress whites they have, I mean, they look pretty sharp and white, right?
They do.
And our Air Force are navy blue. We even have like a tuxedo style one for formal events navy blue that looks pretty cool. You can even get tails and stuff. So yeah, but as far as just a dress mess uniform for all the branches, if we got one there, we can put it up. You'll see. If you don't know what the Marine Corps uniform looks like, it's badass, dude. I'm sorry. Maybe that's just me because I don't know.
You're wondering what could have been. You can picture yourself.
Well, no, because look, here's the deal, and we're way over time, so we got to shut up or they're going to get mad at us, Riley. But here's the deal. If I would have went in the Marine Corps at 17, 18 years old when I signed up those years ago as a sniper and not gone in as a journalist in the Air Force, you and I wouldn't be sitting here right now. There's no way I would have went into journalism if I was a sniper. So everything happens for a reason. God has a plan.
Amen.
And I was supposed to that day flop branches. But utmost respect for you jarheads out there and for all veterans on this Memorial Day weekend. Let's do some housekeeping before we go. Anything new with you? What's shaking? What should we do next week?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I say let's just play it by ear.
Okay.
I don't know. I like that we can bring in a lot of different guests though on this program, so that's very exciting. And if people have suggestions or people they want to see, let us know in the comments. Subscribe, share with your friends.
Yes.
We're curious about feedback, so if there's,
That's key. Let's find out who you want to hear from. I mean, we're picking people and subject matters that we like, that we think are important, that you might be interested in, but there might be other stuff we're missing.
Totally.
So sound off. You can make the comments on social media. We're posting these podcasts, Matt's that he does on Thursdays, ours that we do here on Friday, and we're hoping to add even more. We might even get some ladies involved, some of the anchor ladies here at OAN, and create another podcast. So we're working on more podcasts, and we want to know what you want to hear about. We post them to YouTube, Rumble, Truth, and X. So those 4 platforms, go on, comment, give us your suggestions. And then in the meantime, sign up for OAN and watch live news, watch our talk shows. Riley kicks things off at 6 p.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock here on OAN. You got a news hour with Mike Deneau. 8 o'clock is my show, Real America. Matt Gates' show is on at 9. And then our good friend Chanel Rion does Fine Point at 10. And then more news after that at 11. So
we got to get her on the show at some point.
We should.
We really should.
She's way on the East Coast. I wonder if we could fly her in, or we'll just Zoom her in as well. But we need to get her on, and some of their ladies that do newscasts for us, the anchor ladies. That's why I said there is a podcast in the works with all ladies.
Oh.
Yeah, because come on, let's be real. Are you and I and Matt and Vish and everybody else that does these 2 Anchormen, are we talking about a lot of lady issues every week? Okay, so let's be fair. Let's have equal airtime. And let's have the ladies have a podcast to talk about the issues that, frankly, let's be real. Do you and I really want to delve into some of that?
Respectfully, probably.
Riley, what's your skincare regimen? What are you doing? Oh my, this is so nice. Your skin is so... No, I'm not going to do that. Your hair is so bouncy today. Look at that. What are you using? No, it's not happening, bro. It's not happening, bro.
Point made. Point made.
I mean, they're gonna have mimosas and whatever, and we got the whiskey. So I think we should give the ladies their own show as well.
Agree.
But we should bring them on here and chat with them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Thanks so much. I'm giving you the final word. What's up?
Yeah. So obviously this weekend coming up, I've got some special plans of my own. Gonna go down to Miramar Air Base, actually, the Marine Corps Air Base.
Good for you.
Go see that's where my great grandfather, he served in the Marine Corps 31 years. Was a brigadier general, actually.
Ooh.
World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Cold War, and his wife, my great-grandmother, was a captain. Actually, that's how they met in the service, which is really amazing. And they were both just very standard.
Both Marines?
Yes.
Nice.
She was above his rank or station, I believe, when they met, which is also a whole other thing. But some of the strongest people I ever knew, they were always around the house. They take us down to the Midway and just show us around and give us... When you see that stuff, you really get a deeper appreciation for this place.
Yes.
You understand there's people constantly protecting you. And when you take that for granted as a civilian, so...
A lot of people do.
Yes. So that's my own fault, and I'm glad that I've been exposed to that. So this is a big day.
Good for you. I like that you're doing that. And look at where we live. San Diego is a place that has so much and is so rich in military history. Mm-hmm. And there's tons of veterans here because, they came from some other state. Mm-hmm. They served their country. This might have been their last duty assignment. And they went, oh my God, San Diego's beautiful. I'm going to make it home. And so they ended up staying forever.
That's right.
I've met so many veterans in the San Diego and surrounding areas, that were in the Marines, in the Navy, whatever, and they got out 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and they're still here. So this is a town where you can go out, give a lot of thanks to veterans, but they're everywhere, folks. So give thanks on this Memorial Day weekend. Take a few seconds, maybe a moment of silence. If you had family members or friends that served in or passed, go to those grave sites and pray.
Yes.
Do what Riley's doing. Yes. Go near a base and check it out. If there's a memorial, if there's a big ship like we have the Midway, go take a tour. Just remember, and I started it and I'll end it with this. Freedom ain't free. Don't forget it. Riley?
Truer words have never been spoken. But thank you all, of course, if you made it this far with us in the podcast. Thank you very much for watching. We appreciate it. I know this will go to air as well, I think, on Saturdays and Sundays. So if you can't see it on social media, you should be able to catch it on the programming for the regular OAN Live app. And just keep your eye on the station because we're growing, we're expanding, we're building something very special, and we're reclaiming this country together as a team.
Free speech, free press, speaking truth to power. That's what OAN's about. Right. We ain't going nowhere. They tried to cancel us. We're back, baby, and we're going to be bigger and better than ever. We'll see you next Friday right here on the Anchormen Podcast. God bless you all, and have a great Memorial Day.
Want to see more great videos like this? Click on the link below to subscribe to OAN Live and watch Dan Ball's Real America and The Matt Gates Show on Dish Channel 212. Tune in, subscribe, and watch today.